Brick Lane, East London. An American traveler named Brent Tim steps off the overground and notices something unusual above the street. The signs say Brick Lane in English, and underneath, in Bengali script, they say it again. Brick Lane. Brent looks up and says,
Also, you can see on the street signs, it's in English and Bangla.
You would never see that in America.
2 languages, 1 name, 1 street. But those signs are not decoration. They are evidence of what happened here. Walk deeper into Whitechapel and Brick Lane, and Bangladesh begins appearing everywhere. At Zaman Brothers, shoppers buy Bangladeshi fish, halal meat, rice, mustard oil, and spices. At Gram Bangla, chef Atiq Rahman serves the kind of food normally cooked inside Bangladeshi homes.
Well, we are very famous for fish and everything. We got all Bangladeshi, most of Bangladeshi food.
And on Whitechapel Road, Feast and Mishti serves borta, shutki, shatkara lamb, and Bengali sweets. Abul Kalam explains what people are really coming for.
When people come here, they are nostalgic about Bangladesh.
That word matters, nostalgia. Because thousands of miles from Sylhet, an entire cultural infrastructure has been rebuilt in London. Today, roughly 322,000 Bangladeshis live across Greater London. In Tower Hamlets alone, 107,333 people, 34.6% of the entire borough, identify as Bangladeshi. More than 1 person in 3. Not simply an immigrant community living inside London, a community large enough to have physically reshaped part of the city. And overwhelmingly, this story leads back to one region. Not Dhaka, not Chittagong, Sylhet. For generations, Sylheti sailors crossed oceans aboard British ships. Later came textile workers, restaurant workers, wives, children, and extended families. They settled around Whitechapel, Spitalfields, and Brick Lane. They worked in factories, opened curry houses, built grocery stores, established mosques, entered politics, and eventually, Bengali appeared on the street signs themselves. But the migration has never really stopped. Today, another kind of Bangladeshi newcomer walks these same streets. Syed Aziz Haq came from Bangladesh to study law at the University of London. His ambition is very different from the generation that arrived to work in East London's textile factories. He explains what that British degree means to him.
The LLB degree that I am pursuing from the University of London, it is not only giving me academic credentials, but it is also making me a very strong contender in the already competitive legal sphere out there.
That is the distance this community has traveled. From sailors on British merchant ships, to textile workers, to restaurant owners, to university students competing for global careers. But the story is not simply one of success. In 1978, 24-year-old Bangladeshi textile worker Altab Ali was murdered in a racist attack near Whitechapel. His death helped galvanize a community confronting organized racial violence. Today, the park bearing his name contains a Shaheed Minar, a monument connecting the struggle for Bengali identity in Bangladesh with the struggle for belonging in Britain. And now, another transformation is underway. Brick Lane once had around 60 curry houses. By 2021, fewer than 20 remained. Rents rose. Vintage shops and cafes arrived. Bangladeshi families began moving farther east. The neighborhood they fought to establish became desirable enough that they could increasingly struggle to afford it. Yet Bangladesh keeps appearing in new forms. In restaurants, in mosques, in politics, in supermarkets, in universities. Even in London greenhouses, where Bangladeshi entrepreneurs are now growing lau, puishak, kolmishak, and potol on British soil. And perhaps that is the real story of Banglatown. Not that Bangladesh was recreated perfectly in London, but that Sylhet and London became connected deeply enough to begin changing each other. Tonight, we travel from the Bengali sailors who crossed the oceans of the British Empire to the textile workshops of East London. From Altab Ali and the racist violence of the 1970s, to Brick Lane's curry houses, Whitechapel's markets, Bengali street signs, mosques, farmers, students, and a new British Bangladeshi generation deciding what parts of Sylhet they will carry forward. And we ask how people from one small region of Bangladesh became so deeply embedded in one of the world's largest cities that London eventually began writing their language onto its streets. This is the human map, because when people move, the map moves with them. Subscribe and explore the communities, cultures, and hidden networks quietly reshaping the world. But to understand how Bengali ended up written beneath English on a London street sign, we have to go back before the restaurants, before Banglatown, before Bangladesh itself. The story begins at sea. Most British Bangladeshis in London trace their family roots to the same place. Not Bangladesh broadly, not Dhaka, not Chittagong. Sylhet, a division in the northeast of Bangladesh, whose connection to Britain began long before the great migration waves of the 20th century. It began with empire, tea, shipping, and men crossing oceans. A short documentary from 5 Pillars on the historical connection between Sylhet and Britain frames that relationship with a line the community has repeated in different forms for generations.
It can be argued that the tea of the Bengal region and the tea of the Indian subcontinent actually put the great in Britain.
Sylhet's ties to Britain became even more complicated in 1947. The region held a referendum in which 56% voted to join East Bengal, while 44% voted otherwise. When the border was finally drawn, parts of the old Sylhet district remained in India. But the movement of Sylhetis toward Britain had already begun. Sylheti men served as lascars on British merchant ships, working as crewmen, stokers, and galley workers long before immigration became a national political argument. When ships reached the Pool of London and the East India docks, some of those sailors stayed. They settled around Spitalfields, Whitechapel, and Stepney. Some married. Some opened boarding houses or cafes. Some simply found whatever work was available. They created the first fragile roots of a community that would expand dramatically after the Second World War. By the 1950s and 1960s, Britain's demand for labor drew more men from Sylhet. Then came another acceleration after Bangladesh's 1971 War of Independence. A travel creator documenting Banglatown described the economic logic.
The cost of living in this area of London was much cheaper compared to other areas, and also because most of the migrants started working in the textile and garment factories which were based in this area of London.
And restaurants. 2 industries, textiles and food. Both became foundations of Bangladeshi East London. In the garment workshops, newcomers entered an industry shaped by an earlier immigrant population. Jewish textile merchants had already established workshops and fabric businesses across the East End. Bangladeshi workers learned inside many of those same commercial networks before eventually opening businesses of their own. The neighborhood changed hands without completely changing function. Different immigrants, same streets, same workshops. But building a life here came with a cost. A.B., a British Bangladeshi creator who grew up in nearby Poplar, remembers what his father's generation encountered.
In the 70s, there used to be a group called National Front. National Front was a racist group, far-right group, where they used to come and bully Bangladeshi community or any sort of Asian community around here.
The violence became systematic. People were attacked in the streets. Families learned which roads felt safe. Young men organized patrols. And then in 1978, one killing changed the community. Altab Ali was 24 years old, a Bangladeshi textile worker. He was walking home along Adler Street in Whitechapel when he was murdered in a racist attack. His death became a rallying point. Thousands marched from Whitechapel toward Downing Street, carrying his coffin and demanding that the violence against Britain's Asian communities could no longer be treated as an ordinary part of city life. The murder of one textile worker became part of a larger political awakening. Today, a park in Whitechapel carries his name. Inside Altab Ali Park stands a replica of the Shahid Minar, the monument in Dhaka commemorating those killed defending the Bengali language in 1952. Every February 21st, International Mother Language Day, Londoners gather there, lay flowers, and remember. Think about what that means. A monument born from Bangladesh's struggle over language now stands in a London park named after a Bangladeshi immigrant murdered because of his race. Two histories, thousands of miles apart, joined in one public space. The park sits only a few hundred meters from Brick Lane, a murdered worker, a Bengali monument, a British park. Together, they represent something larger than remembrance. They represent permanence. The community that once arrived to work inside other people's factories had fought hard enough to have its history written into London's landscape. But a park was only one kind of institution, because just around the corner stands a building that tells an even bigger story. One that belonged first to French Protestants, then to Jewish refugees, and finally to the Bangladeshis who transformed Brick Lane. And all three communities worshipped inside the same walls. There is a building on Brick Lane that summarizes the entire East End immigration story in one structure. It began as a Huguenot Protestant chapel in 1743, built by French Protestant refugees fleeing religious persecution. Later, it became a Methodist chapel. Then, a synagogue, serving the Eastern European Jewish community that flooded into Spitalfields in the late 19th century, fleeing pogroms and persecution. And then, in 1976, it became a mosque, the Brick Lane Jamia Masjid. As the Bangladeshi community grew, the building changed again to serve the people now filling the surrounding streets. One building, different faiths, different waves of migrants. The history of East London immigration written into a single structure. A local creator documenting Brick Lane explained the layers.
After the Second World War, a lot of Bangladeshis settled in this area on Brick Lane. A lot of them who came here started working as tailors for these Jewish fabric shops.
The people changed, the building remained. And something similar happened to Brick Lane itself. Today, a railway bridge almost divides the street into two different worlds. On one side, Bangladeshi London, curry houses, sweet shops, pawn sellers, restaurants like Gram Bangla, serving the village-style dishes Chef Atiq Rahman described earlier. Supermarkets like Zaman Brothers, where Bengali families can find the fish, spices, and ingredients of home. On the other side, vintage clothing stores, cafes, cocktail bars, the Truman brewery markets, and the global tourist economy. A local resident describes the divide.
So basically after this bridge, so all this area of Brick Lane, it's mainly, you know, vintage and like quirky shops, attracting a very, very different crowd, so more like a hipster crowd. Whereas on the other side of the bridge, so this side with all the Bangladeshi restaurants and shops.
Both are Brick Lane. And that coexistence, the heritage community and the gentrification wave pressing against each other, has become one of the defining tensions of Bangladeshi London. In the early 2000s, Brick Lane had roughly 60 curry houses. By 2021, fewer than 20 remained. Rents rose, old businesses disappeared. Vintage stores and new restaurants moved in. But perhaps the most revealing response came from a person of Bangladeshi heritage who had moved into the neighborhood himself. Watching the transformation around him, he began wondering whether his own presence was contributing to it. Was he now part of the problem? It is the gentrification paradox in its most personal form. A community can spend decades fighting for the right to belong somewhere, only to watch that same neighborhood become desirable enough that its own families struggle to remain there. But the Bangladeshis leaving Brick Lane did not disappear from London. They moved to Whitechapel Road, to Green Street in Newham, to Upton Park, and increasingly farther east toward Waltham Forest, Barking, and Dagenham. AB described what he has watched happen.
Now it's changed because now Bangladeshis are trying to leave, trying to spread out far east, London, go a bit further out, you know?
The geography changes, the network survives, and so do some of the pressures that shaped it. AB grew up in Tower Hamlets and describes two distinct experiences of racism across his lifetime.
I grew up here, and there's two sorts of racism that I faced here in the UK.
The first, he says, came from simply being seen as Asian. After September 11th, something changed. The second increasingly came from being seen as Muslim. Two generations, two kinds of hostility, the same streets. Yet the community that survived organized far-right violence in the 1970s adapted again. It stayed, organized, built institutions, entered politics, and transformed buildings once created by earlier refugees into institutions of its own. But architecture can only tell you that a community has established itself. To understand how deeply Bangladesh has been recreated here, you have to leave Brick Lane's monuments and walk into the ordinary places where people actually live. The markets, the grocery stores, and especially the food. Walk through Whitechapel Market on any morning. The stalls begin near Whitechapel Station, where Bengali script appears on the signage right at the entrance, and stretch west along Whitechapel Road. Raw fish on ice, fresh jackfruit cut into enormous sections, Bangladeshi green mangoes air freighted in and sold at a premium because the community wants the specific variety from home, not a substitute. Bitter gourd, taro, fresh pan, spices whose English names don't quite exist. A Bangladeshi language creator documenting life here stands in the market and points toward the skyline. Right behind me, you can see central London, and right beside central London, this Bengali market has grown. And then he makes the comparison that explains why the market matters. Just like the traditional markets in Bangladeshi villages or suburban towns, you see the exact same thing here. The proximity is extraordinary. You can see the towers of the City of London from a market stall selling fresh pan. The financial capital of Britain and something resembling a traditional Bangladeshi bazaar occupy the same skyline. And inside East London's restaurants, the food story runs in two directions simultaneously. There is the curry house legacy, the restaurants that helped build Britain's appetite for South Asian food and gave generations of Bangladeshi families an economic foothold. And then there is the food Bangladeshis actually eat at home. Gram Bangla on Brick Lane belongs to that second world. Head chef Atiq Rahman describes the restaurant's identity simply.
Well, we are very famous for fish and everything. We got all Bangladeshi, most of Bangladeshi food.
Host Latif, a British Asian food creator visiting the restaurant, explains the distinction.
Village-style Bangladeshi food. So what you would get at your Bangladeshi household for traditional sort of meals, this is what he actually does in the restaurant.
That distinction matters. The British Indian restaurant, or BIR, developed its own commercial cuisine over decades. Dishes adapted and refined for British customers by South Asian restaurant owners building businesses in a new country. The authentic Bangladeshi kitchen is different. Freshwater fish like boal and rui, aloo bharta hand-mashed with mustard oil and raw red onion, shutki, regional dishes from Chittagong and Sylhet that would rarely appear on the traditional British curry house menu. At Feast and Mishti on Whitechapel Road, Abul Kalam explains why customers recognize the difference.
All of our curries on the buffet is handy cooked, so it's a personalized effort, personalized touch by our chef to make it as close as a home-cooked meal as possible.
And that authenticity serves something deeper than appetite. For many customers, Abul says, when people come here, they are nostalgic about Bangladesh. The restaurant becomes more than somewhere to eat. It becomes somewhere to remember. And the infrastructure extends far beyond Brick Lane. On Green Street in Newham, another Bangladeshi commercial world has developed. At Baraka Bazaar, families shop for halal meat, regional spices, curry leaves, specialty rice, and ingredients tailored specifically to Bangladeshi kitchens. Nearby, newer restaurants like Deshi Hub represent another generation of the community. Contemporary presentation, social media visibility, but food and hospitality still rooted in the same culture. It was inside one of these restaurants that British Bangladeshi creator Millie Begum encountered an elderly woman. The woman recognized her from YouTube. She explained that she watched Millie's videos every day because age and poor health meant she could no longer travel much herself.
I'm watching your videos every day, sister. I'm an elderly and you're showing me the beautiful country. I can't travel much due to my health. Thank you so much.
It is a small moment, but it reveals something important about what community means after generations of migration. Once, preserving Bangladesh meant importing fish, spices, and vegetables. Then it meant restaurants, mosques, markets, and Bengali signs. Now it can also mean an elderly woman sitting at home, watching another Bangladeshi walk through the streets she can no longer visit. The vlog becomes community infrastructure. But food is perhaps the easier inheritance. The harder question begins when a child leaves the restaurant, goes home to a Bengali family, and wakes up the next morning in Britain. Afsar grew up in a village in Sylhet. He arrived in London as a young man, with no English and no map of the city. In Bangladesh, community had been almost unavoidable. Everyone knew everyone. Neighbors knew your family. People stopped to talk. London felt completely different. On the color-coded podcast, co-hosted with his partner Alexandra, Afsar described the shock. Growing up in the village in Bangladesh, everyone knew everyone. Coming to London, everything was closed off, fast-paced, and completely anonymous. Nobody made eye contact on the tube. Then came school. A new country was difficult enough, but Afsar entered its classrooms without speaking the language. Starting school without speaking a word of English was terrifying. You feel completely mute for the first few months until you start to pick things up. Arriving mute, gradually finding language, learning a city where strangers did not make eye contact. That experience helps explain something central to the British Bangladeshi generation that followed. Because many of their children grew up between two complete worlds. Inside the house, Sylheti, Bengali food, family expectations, religion. The expectation in some families of marrying within the community, and the constant awareness of the journey their parents made and what it cost them. Outside the house, English, British schools, British friends, workplaces, popular culture, and the pressure to navigate identities that did not always fit neatly together. Afsar describes it as living two completely different lives, Bengali tradition inside the home and British social life outside it. That is why the bilingual street signs on Brick Lane mean more than convenience. They represent something earlier generations could barely have imagined. The outside world, public, municipal, British, speaking both languages too. The translation now goes in both directions, and the community's movement into British public life has been substantial. Tower Hamlets has been governed for significant periods by politicians of Bangladeshi heritage. Lutfur Rahman, twice elected mayor of Tower Hamlets, represents a community that moved from textile workshops and restaurant kitchens into the political leadership of one of London's most strategically important boroughs in less than 3 generations. The same borough that sits beside the City of London. Then there is Ohid Ahmed, a long-serving Tower Hamlets councillor. His story reveals another dimension of this identity. After multiple terms in London politics, Ahmed publicly discussed the possibility of eventually pursuing politics in Bangladesh. The significance is not simply the political controversy around him. It is the geography. A British Bangladeshi politician can build a career in London while still imagining a political future thousands of miles away in Bangladesh. That is not the story of a community disconnected from its homeland, nor is it the story of one that failed to integrate into Britain. It is something more complicated, a community capable of operating in both places at once. And the connection continues with new arrivals. Students like Syed Aziz Haq, a Bangladeshi LLB student at the University of London, represent another migration route. He came not for a textile workshop or restaurant kitchen, but for education and professional mobility. As Syed explains,
the LLB degree that I am pursuing from the University of London, it is not only giving me academic credentials, but it is also making me a very strong contender in the already competitive legal sphere out there.
Global credentials. From a London university in the same part of the city where earlier Bangladeshi migrants arrived looking for industrial work. The occupation changed, the ambition expanded, but the route between Bangladesh and London remained open. And increasingly, that route works in both directions. Because while people, money, and ambition continue to travel from Bangladesh to Britain, something unexpected is now growing on British soil and traveling back home. In 2023, 3 Bangladeshi entrepreneurs began growing something unusual in Britain. Habib, Imdad, and Razak launched Fresh Krishi, meaning fresh agriculture, a commercial greenhouse operation growing Bangladeshi vegetables organically on British soil. Lao, bottle gourd. Pui shak, Malabar spinach. Kolmi shak, water spinach. Potol, pointed gourd. For decades, British Bangladeshi families had relied heavily on imports for vegetables like these, often paying premium prices for the specific varieties they remembered from home. Now, they are being grown here, in London. Fresh Krishi uses multi-tier farming to maximize limited space, automated irrigation, and organic fertilizers. Its produce reaches Bangladeshi grocery stores across East London, including Yasin Sobji on Green Street, while pop-up markets connect growers directly with the community. There is something almost symbolic about it. The community that arrived to work in someone else's textile factories is now growing its own food on British soil. And food is only one measure of permanence. On Whitechapel Road stands the East London Mosque, one of Britain's most important Muslim institutions. Together with the adjacent London Muslim Centre and Mariam Centre, it provides far more than prayer space. Educational programs, community services, family support, and major gatherings have made the complex part of the social infrastructure of Bangladeshi East London. During Ramadan, thousands move through its doors. The curry houses may disappear, families may move farther east, but institutions like this are harder to uproot. And even as the community became more established in Britain, its relationship with Bangladesh never disappeared. It became financial. A short film examining the connection between Sylhet and Britain's Bangladeshi diaspora explains what decades of remittances eventually did back home.
So much money started coming from the United Kingdom that Sylhet eventually had to develop and modernize to cater for the British Bangladeshi diaspora.
Money earned in London built houses in Sylhet. It funded businesses, supported families, built mosques, changed villages, and helped transform the physical landscape of a region thousands of miles away. In that sense, Sylhet's development is partly a London story. The migration changed both places. But that relationship now faces a generational question. The same film challenges British-born Bangladeshis not to reduce their relationship with Bangladesh to occasional family visits. Why do we go to Bangladesh? We go to get married, or we go to bury our dead. Why can't we go and invest? Why can't we go and help build the country? That question contains the tension running through this entire story, between the country that raised you and the country that raised your parents, between a street in East London and a village in Sylhet, between British opportunity and Bangladeshi inheritance. Fresh Krishi may offer one small answer: Bangladeshi vegetables growing in British greenhouses, British money building homes in Sylhet. The UK is consistently one of the top sources of remittances to Bangladesh, a country that received a record $26.9 billion in total global remittances in 2024, with the British Bangladeshi community a significant contributor to that figure. Students traveling toward London, investment traveling back. The community that built Banglatown never truly chose between Britain and Bangladesh. It learned to live in both. And perhaps nowhere is that dual identity clearer than where our story began, on Brick Lane, beneath a street sign written twice. Brick Lane, evening. The market stalls are closing. Restaurants are filling. Maghrib prayer has ended at the East London Mosque. At Altab Ali Park, flowers rest beneath the Shahid Minar. And nearby, the building that was once a chapel, then a synagogue, and now a mosque, glows from within. Above it all, the street signs say Brick Lane, in two scripts. That is not a detail. It is the story. Today, roughly 322,000 Bangladeshis live across Greater London, including more than 107,000 in Tower Hamlets. They built restaurants and supermarkets, mosques and political institutions. They grew Bangladeshi vegetables on British soil and sent British earnings back to villages in Sylhet. And they raised children who learned to live between two places without completely surrendering either one. Abi once described the hospitality of this community simply.
Exactly the way we treat him in Bangladesh is the way we're going to treat him here in the UK. So,
Culture, carried across continents. Home, rebuilt street by street. Sylhet came to London and stayed. But what do you think? Has Banglatown preserved Bangladesh in Britain or created something entirely new? Tell us in the comments. This is The Human Map. Subscribe and explore the communities, cultures, and hidden networks quietly reshaping the world.